What's up, everybody? We're live again here on the corner. On the other end of the line, we have a recurring guest who is starting to become a usual Mugen, straight out of Maryland, United States. What's up, Mugen?
What's up, man? How you doing?
I'm doing good. Um, how's things been? How have you been?
I've been fine. I just finished working. Well, I did finish just taking a break, but I was working on a 3D model rigging for a class. So that's what was kind of busy for the last hour. I have I'm in a different server that helps people with like 3D artwork, Blender stuff. So I had a friend that was helping me, but
All right, all right.
it's almost done with the semester and just the last final assignments. So it's the finish line, basically.
Are you like hoping to become like a game developer or
Yeah, that's the
something in
plan.
the field?
That's the plan. I'm currently majoring in computer game design, and I think I want to focus on creating assets, and or maybe even dwelling in Foley work and sound effects, because those are the two areas that are currently of high interest for me. So.
Wow, that's a really cool, like study course direction you've taken. Um, but like, what kind of like games would you hope to be like part of developing in the future?
What kind of games? I'm not too sure. I'm not. I have, I don't know. There's like so many kinds of games genres out there, but I guess am interested in kind of the open world kind of games. But those usually take massive effort, cooperation. Those are huge games typically,
Oh yeah.
and but something. Uh, well, I'll tell you this. In one of my classes right now, which is a narrative class about story writing, the game that I'm sort of writing out the story or creating a setting for is a sort of story-driven game, kind of like have you heard Detroit Becomes Human or Heavy Rain, those kind of games,
Yeah, I
but
heard
the
of them.
setting takes place in it's like sort of a fantastical, futuristic. So basically it's about these travelers that have okay, so in order to like wrap your mind around it, there's this thing called the Kardashev scale, and it's a actual scientific measurement for the development of a civilization in this universe. So a type one, don't quote me on this, but a type one civilization is basically a civilization that can harness the resources of their local star or something. A type 2 civilization is one of their entire solar system. Type 3 is galaxy, type 4 is local supercluster or something like that, and type 5 is like the universe or something like that. So we're like a type 1 civilization, I want to say. Um humanity, that is. So I don't know. So that's the sort of scope, the framework that I put for my story. And so now there's these travelers that are a type 4, and they're looking for something, quote unquote, something that would enable them to progress from a type 4 civilization to a type 5. Now, even at a type 4, their level of technology is something that we can't even comprehend, right? And for example, one of these travelers, he's kind of even more impressive than the rest. His name is Kenan, and he's able to alter the molecular composition of objects, and including himself. So he can warp, he can teleport, he can change his body, things like that. I don't know. So, but it's like story driven though. There's moments in the game, in my game, I didn't actually create it yet. It's just a story in the game where you can sort of like travel from places to places on Earth, using their abilities. And there's even a combat sequence and all that, but mainly it's a story driven game. So the interactions and the emotions between characters is what I'm focusing on. So I guess that's like one way to see the game. It's like a mixture of, games and things like that. But the games that I'm like more attracted to as like personally in my day-to-days, like typically action adventure games like Legend of Zelda. I love the Legend of Zelda games. You know, things like that. But I have other ideas as well. I thought of doing like an epic dodgeball game, kind of like Smash Bros, but dodgeball, you know?
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah. I know.
it's like a
Yeah.
top-down view. I don't know. So I'm open to ideas. It depends.
I just want to like clarify like what you were talking about earlier was the Kardashev scale, a measurement tool on how to measure a civilization's technological advancements. And the first one that you mentioned was a type 1 civilization, which you think that we are, right? Which is a planetary civilization that can use and store all the energy available on its planet.
Hmm.
But like I was like just reading this and I was wondering, do you know what the last type in the scale is? A type alpha and type V civilization.
Those are like, I mean, those are like, uh, e- not even perceivable because that would deal with something that's like they're able to create simulations or create reality themselves. So it's just
Yeah,
called type 5 or type alpha. Yeah.
able to harness the energy of the scale of multiple universes and even
Yeah,
maybe be able to create universes from this energy. It
exactly.
sounds completely
Crazy stuff.
insane. Yeah, crazy
Insane. Yeah.
stuff. But yeah, I just wanted to say what it was called and that it's an interesting scale. But yeah, man, game developing in itself is like really interesting. But I'm like assuming that it can also be hard work because
Oh yeah, for sure.
I remember like reading that when they used 8 years or something creating Red Dead Redemption 2, there was 1,000 people involved working 16 hours a day every day for those 8 years.
Yeah,
It's
it's Rockstar Games, especially because they had like issues as well in their companies in terms of crunching and all that. I had actually had to write a paper on the crunch culture in the game industry, which is prevalent in other industries, but notoriously at the time I was writing, it was especially uh especially rampant in the game industry because, for example, well, Japan to begin with already have a crazy work culture. And like, for example, I heard from a close friend or a relative rather that sometimes in order to protest like unfair hours, they just produce even more. Like, say an employee is assigned to do like X amount of papers in a short amount of time, right? As a way to protest, they'll do even more papers than asked for to protest. Is So it's pretty crazy. Like the work culture, the overworking culture in Japan, for example, is crazy. And Japan is also a big player in the game industry with the games that they come out, and Rockstar Games specifically, because people were in the last I don't know if it's E3, but it's sort of game showcase event. People were asking where GTA 6 was and everything, and then a bit of research. I did a bit of research and found out that they're just starting the early stages of development for GTA 6 because they're working on fixing the crunch culture in the work
what,
environment
what
in the company.
can you explain what the crunch culture actually means?
Okay, so crunch culture is basically uh working an employee overtime because of close deadlines and them not being compensated by it. So crunching is like, okay, this is crunch time. It's time to like put in 12 hours in the day working on this project and do it as, continue doing that before the deadline, because games have to be released at a certain amount of time for whatever the producers, the HR wants to do. So they have to like, be they have to continuously overwork themselves, a lot of them, and they don't really get compensated by it because they're replaceable in a sense, which kind of sucks.
Why
So,
why would anybody accept such terms?
well, because well, there's multiple reasons. You want to. Some people, they want to build that resume. They're following their dreams or whatnot, and there's going to be a ton of reasons why people put up with with uh with those kinds of working conditions. And in the game industry as well, it's typically, from what I've read, is it's by contract as well. So you're hired by projects. So you're hired for this project. Once this project is done, well, you got to find another job. It's not fixed, at least for
Yes.
smaller companies.
Yes, I read something about this that, for instance, that game developers are not, that game developers cannot expect to continue being hired in the same company because game developers are
Yep,
typically, as you say, hired for the project. So
exactly. Yep.
when the project is finished and the game is out, then it's out the door, and you gotta find another project, and get paid.
Exactly. Yep. So you got to make connections and things like that, and really stand out too in terms of your field or something, or
Wow.
your meter of expertise. So that's why, like, game industry is not that appealing, but the content is very appealing to me. But actual, how you're gonna work and do all that is, it's very dicey. It's even scary, I would say, because work is not guaranteed. But when you do participate in something, you know, it's that's why a lot of people, unless you're in like a huge company and you're already established themselves, but that's not how people start out. Usually they start small. So you want to be like, make a really good small game, right? And hopefully, cash out on that one, instead
Yeah.
of having to depend on your livelihood, having to depend on, the interest of people in suits, I guess, or I don't know. Yeah, I'm
Um,
talking about the HR, the ones
yeah.
with the money at the top.
I'm just like imagining the horror scenario. You're 50 years old, gray haired, and you're fired, and you're like, handing out like all these applications, and you get a job interview, and you're like, yeah, I was educated, like back in 2021, 30 years, 30
Yeah,
years ago. How the fuck are you going to get a job? Because there would be so many new young ones just fresh out of school, with like
yeah, exactly.
generations in front of you, and
So
yeah.
one way to combat the coal crunch culture is like the formation of unions, for example. Um, so because the game industry, I think only has like one union. I can't remember the name off top, but unions is one way to combat that, and just the remodeling of the whole business structure to begin with, in order to not even to limit crunching to begin with. Like, so make it so that the employees are given enough time to do a project in the first place. That might better work conditions, and also increase the amount of people that are going into the industry, because the game industry is very lucrative right now. I think it's like way past the movie industry. For example, it's just a very profitable area. So, and companies are starting to know that. So the demand for employees are gonna it's gonna increase, um, and also the supply. So economically wise, I'm not sure how that's gonna end up, but You know,
It's
it's
also,
something they need to get that sorted out before it gets too crazy. Because
yeah,
with the employees are more and more coming out and saying, "Yo, this is how they treat us," and people are not too happy about that. But at least on the good side, like gamers, consumers are like aware of that, and they're like, yeah, it's fine if the game takes a while to come out, as long as they're able to actually be fair to the people that are actually creating these masterpieces and stuff like that. That's going to be great.
for sure, for sure. But like you're like saying that it's also crazy how much the gaming industry has evolved in just a couple of decades.
Oh yeah,
And
for sure. That's all thanks to technology and programmers and all that, which is another thing, like, because programming is a huge part of the game industry, of course, because you need programmers. So at least programmers, the ones that are well versed, even if they run out of, like, they're done for a project, they can fairly easily pick up something else, not even in the game industry, but in a total different industry, because it's programming, depending on the language, of course, but it's still programming. So at least they have. But if you're like a lot more niche, let's say like voice acting, or something that's more limited.
do you know like what games actually came out 20 years ago today?
20 years ago,
Yeah.
so year 2000,
Uh
can't quite
well
remember.
well, apparently, like there was a peak in the industry in 1996. So not quite 20 years ago yet, but almost 20 years ago, like 19 years ago. Um, I think you like know some of these games, like Tomb Raider for PlayStation One.
Well, I think I actually did have that game. I can't remember. This is like my childhood.
Yeah,
uh I knew I had like one I knew I played like at least one Tomb Raider game on the PlayStation
yeah.
2,
It
but it
it
might
was
be
it was just horrible graphics compared to what you see today. And Super Mario 64 for the Nintendo. Do you remember that?
Super Mario 64. Yeah, that was the first video game that I've ever played. I had
Yeah,
it on my N64,
right.
and yeah, that was a breakthrough. It set the tone. It changed the game industry for forever. That game, it was incredible for the time, and people still play it nowadays. They're mostly speedrunners. They trying to beat the records and stuff like that. But yeah, it gave a blueprint to 3D 3D design in game design.
Yeah,
So
that was an awesome game, man. I would like
yeah,
to see something like that. Mario open world
right.
in
That kind of stuff.
today's graphics,
I
right?
mean, I would say Odyssey did a very good job though at simulating that. Uh, Super Mario Odyssey is like, I think this is the closest, because at the end of the day, Mario games are platformers, right? So making something open world and keeping the platform aspect is kind of it's kind of a challenge, right? But I think Odyssey sort of merged the two fairly well. It's still level by level, but within the level, you had free exploration throughout the boundaries and hidden stuff here and there. And even when you did collect like a star, well, in Odyssey it's a moon. Even when you did collect the moon, the level didn't stop. You just continued, right? Whereas in Super Mario 64, once you collect a star, you get out of the level, and if you want to collect another star, you go back in. So they kind of like merged all that fairly well. I would say it's a very good game.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Other games that came out 20 years ago was the first Resident Evil game for PlayStation One.
Resident Evil. Those are like, I haven't played that many games. I've heard of Resident Evil, but
Yeah,
unfortunately I've
like
never.
not my favorites. And then there was Quake, which I don't know. Like I always like seen Quake as just like another version of Doom, if you know what I mean. Um,
Dude.
yeah. Uh,
One games I wish I could go back to. They came out like some years after the 2000s, but the God of War games I would have loved to play them because they also like changed what's it called? Forgot the term, but basically timed buttons. So when you perform an action, you have to press the X button like at the right time. During the action sequences or the Y button. Those that kind of gameplay. They really
yeah,
went
yeah,
at the top. Yeah,
kind of like Tony Hawk, where you had to, like press the right
exactly,
buttons for the combos.
exactly.
Yeah.
So it was crazy with because like the whole plus the scale of the games because you're like Kratos, you're already this warrior, but then you go against these giants or these titans, and it's just epic, right? It's epic and it's really nice.
Yeah.
It's really nice.
Yeah.
So I would love to play. Unfortunately, I don't own a PS. I only own a Xbox. So, but the game God of War series is exclusive on PlayStation. But I would have loved to play God of War 5 and the next one that's coming out.
Yeah. Did you ever have like no, let me ask you this. What was the first gaming console you ever had?
So the N64.
1064. You don't
Mm-hmm.
have any older brothers or older people that you know that had like,
And
the Super Nintendo?
nah, I've never seen it. I've never seen
No.
it ever. Yeah, I don't. And plus, the funny thing is that I didn't even know you could have multiple games on the N64 because I only had Super Mario 64. That's it. And I had
Oh
no
wow.
idea you could have there was like other games until I went and this was years later. I went to like a family friend and I saw in their shelves they had stacks of 64 games. And I was like, "Yo, the cartridges look exactly like my Super Mario 64." And then it clicked. I was like, "Wait a minute, it's an actual, console." I thought it was like the game can only be played on this thing, right?
Oh, holy
And
shit.
and I didn't know that because my parents weren't big on games. That's the only game that we had for a very long time until we finally upgraded to the Nintendo Wii years later. But even then, on the Wii, we only had like Wii Sports, Wii Fit, one bowling game, uh, and then Wii Music. So we
Oh
had like the
man.
standard Wii games. They were fun, but we didn't have much. So then after that, we got the new Wii, and that came with like Super Mario Brothers, and then I had like Super Mario Galaxy 2 as well, which is another phenomenal game. The Super Mario Galaxy games I think it's my favorite Mario game. Like I I enjoyed it more than probably because I like space stuff. The concept of like space exploration and whatnot is I'm biased towards that. So, but the game itself is objectively great, amazing mechanic and everything. So, yeah. What about you? Did you have any like what was your first console?
I think like yeah, I also had like a Nintendo 64 as my first console, but I do remember like
Okay.
some other kids in the street had like older sisters, and they had
Mhm.
like the freaking older one, the Super Nintendo,
Mm.
which was like we come to like think about it, is it's also just like a crazy evolution from just the Super Nintendo to the Nintendo 64, because the Super Nintendo was only 2D, right?
Yeah,
And
I
then
think so.
then you move up like just one console, like one generation further, and all of a sudden it's 3D and Super Mario 64 and shit. Um, yeah, that was my first console, but I don't remember like having that many games to it either. Like I had Mario 64
Mhm.
and GoldenEye.
GoldenEye.
Yeah, James Bond GoldenEye.
Oh yeah, I had one James Bond game on PlayStation. I think I can't remember which one it was though, but I know I had one at least one. Maybe it was actually maybe I'm just remembering wrong, and it was actually um It was actually what's it called? Sorry, I'm kind of blanking out. It was
Yeah,
actually GoldenEye on the N64.
yeah. Did you get your consoles from your parents?
Yeah, my dad bought the N64. I'm pretty sure this was. I don't think I could even remember when he bought it because I was very young. But I know that was like the first one that we had. The PlayStation that we had was we also had that later, but my older brother, since he lived overseas or he went to school overseas, he took it to chill out, and then I think he got it stolen or broken or something like that. So I didn't get to play that much on it.
Oh, wow. Damn, that sucks.
But we were subscribers to Nintendo from the beginning because the whole family friendly aspect. Uh, so we didn't really my the whole stigma about video games even still today still goes on. The whole, oh, it causes violence and all that. So at the very least, even though my parents were kind of against it, like if he was gonna get a console, it was gonna be the one that's like family friendly looking. So he went with Nintendo. So Nintendo Wii, Nintendo's and the N64, and then my older sister has bought a Switch as well.
Wow, lucky man.
Yeah.
I remember I was like in junior high school when I asked if I could like have a PlayStation 2 or something. And the answer
Mm-hmm.
from my dad was just, like a clear no. You want money to buy like another damn gaming console, you gotta get it yourself. Earn that shit, boy. And I was like,
Relatable.
okay. So I go and like bring my Nintendo to some super shady place in town that like we're trading games and trading games and consoles. And I deliver this, and I'm a kid, so I don't know nothing. And I ask, so what can I get? What can I get for it? Um, Nintendo 64 and a couple of games. Yeah, $20. Like,
Yeah.
like yeah, that's it. That was what I got. So I go back, and like I don't nearly have enough to buy a damn PlayStation 2. Um, but lo and behold, I just fish out one of my dad's cartons of smokes from one of his drawers. And I go to school with that shit. And in the breaks, I will going around like, cigarettes, yo, $15, $15 a pack. So within a day, I had the money to buy to buy a PlayStation 2.
Sheesh,
And
the hustle, man.
yeah, that was a hustle. So like when he finally got back from, he was working on an oil rig. That's why I could just take a carton without him noticing. Uh, so now, you know what? I'm not even sure that he ever noticed that I had the PlayStation 2, because like I had my room in another floor of the house, right?
Mm-hmm.
So whenever he might have like asked me about like a year later or something, and I just made some shit up like, yeah, you bought it from me. I did. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So I,
I think
I
we did
had
that once or something.
yeah. So I had that like I had that a long time. Um, and I had like a lot of games for the PlayStation 2. I remember, like Tony Hawk. I was a really big Tony Hawk fan.
Mm-hmm.
And like I don't remember like what else, but like it has to have like been Resident Evil games and Grand Theft Auto 3. God damn.
Ooh,
Like think about the graphics on that.
yeah, man. I mean, it looked amazing at our age. Even Mario 64,
Yeah,
like the graphics back then, when you were a kid, you're like, oh my God, this looks so real, dude.
yeah,
But then now you're looking back, you're like, oh, dang, GTA 3, and 60, Mario, it didn't look that amazing, but they were still objectively good games. There are still very good games. It's just graphic
yeah.
wise. Nowadays, there's some games nowadays that you can't even tell from if it's an actual the just so much detail. Like I've
Uh,
never played it, but I've seen the videos on animation in for Red Dead Redemption 2, how realistic everything is. Like the details. It's
Yeah,
insane the amount of work that goes in.
yeah, it
It's like
is.
insane.
But I will say though, that when you see like movies on that E3 show,
Hmm.
some of them like kind of cheats because they show the cinematics, the cutscenes, right?
Yeah. And sometimes it's not even cutscenes of the game. It's just they actually make, special. It's just a render of a scene or whatever, not from the
Yeah,
game, but just a render,
yeah,
made to made as an advertisement.
and the
So it's like,
gameplay they sometimes show is like, yeah, like you said, like rendered and brushed up, so
yeah,
it is nowhere
exactly.
near the product that you're getting when it's coming out. The product you're
Yeah,
getting is
absolutely.
worse than what you're seeing.
It's like a lot of
Uh,
people had issues with back a few years ago with the I think it was Mass Effect. There was like Mass Effect Andromeda, and then also people had issues with No Man's Sky, and how the developers, well, the one speaking for the team, was they made these promises and they're showcasing these things that they weren't actually in the game, just misleading essentially. And that's what a lot of gamers they're upset about. It's like, just be honest, Even like recently with like Cyberpunk, because it was a really bugged, and then it was not really what people
yeah,
thought it was going to be, and so the game died very quickly, and that sucks, because imagine you spend all this time working on the game, and then all it takes is one bad thing, and it's like all that work that you put in that's the thing. That's one thing I'm scared of if I do start working in the industry, is that you lose the love that you have for your work, because it gets like it gets it just gets overlooked by bad publicity, and you put in all this work into this aspect, into this one area of the game, but then the game comes out, and because the upper management didn't handle the whole procedure well, your people hate your game, and well, your work along with it, and you kind of lose the love for making games because of that. That's why a lot of people, they get started, they want to do a small game, in a small team, and hope that, kind of like Among Us. Among Us is got huge, out of a fluke maybe, because there's a lot of luck that goes involved as well for the success of your game. But
well, you know, like what they say, like hell is all about reputation. So if you're
mm,
part of like making a game big, then you're kind of set, right?
right,
Because you were part of that team that made that shit happen.
yeah,
But like, however, when you are if you are on the team on games such as say Dying Light 2 and Dead Island 2, which has now like, you know, like been postponed year after year after year, and production or game production company changed several times, then I wouldn't say that your track record is that great, you know.
mm,
But I'm really surprised with Cyberpunk 2077
hmm.
because, you know, like they spent a great deal of resources on that game.
I
I
think
mean,
they
like
should have just delayed. They should have delayed the
the launch
release.
date. Yeah,
Yeah, but it's just people were hyping it up, and so you want to ride the hype and release it at just the right moment, right? So
yeah.
that you can maximize your profits. But if it's at the cost of actual quality, well, then you end up with, everybody buys it as soon as it releases, sure, but then you have no player base that's gonna stick around, and
No,
so that,
right. Like it's a short game, right?
exactly,
You can amp up the stocks and earn a lot of money on the stocks, but only shortly. And then right after,
exactly,
it's going to collapse when people understand that the product that they're getting is like really crap and not the Maserati that they ordered.
yeah.
Yeah, but
I'm
like,
not,
damn,
no, I've
man.
not played the game, but I don't even think it might not be that bad, but it's just people memed it out because when you overhype something, you have the people that are always waiting for that one mistake, that one area where they can just nitpick and meme the hell out of it. So that they did that with the bugs and everything. So and then
I,
that catches on, and people are like, "Oh wow, see, I'm not gonna spend $60 because again, $60 that's a lot of money too."
I
Uh,
always get skeptic when I see games being overhyped.
yeah,
Because it makes me like think like that seems too good to be true,
yeah,
right?
exactly.
And with Cyberpunk 2077, should I be like, shit, man, they even had Keanu Reeves in on that shit.
Yeah, exactly. The whole marketing and everything. And to be
Yeah.
honest, yeah, I mean, me personally, because on my own personal taste, it didn't really appeal to me to begin with. And because that's the thing, I wouldn't spend that much on a franchise that I've not heard before. You know what I mean? Like if it was like GTA 6, oh hell yeah. Because I know,
Uh,
because
the,
like GTA 5, amazing.
then
GTA
you
4, great.
then you know you're getting your money's worth. Uh,
Exactly.
but then again, like Rockstar Games is not overhyping it. They typically release one cinematic trailer on an E3 2 years before release date, and then 1 year
Hmm.
before release date, they release an actual gameplay trailer, and then you have game in hand a year after that again, right?
Hmm.
It's not like it was with Cyberpunk 2077 with YouTube ads, TV ads. I mean, like they went all in on marketing on that
Yeah,
game.
man. All in.
Holy
And
shit!
sometimes marketing really works though. Like for a mobile game, Raid the meme, Raid Shadow Legends. It was marketing like crazy, like paying YouTubers, paying everybody to advertise their game.
Yeah.
And I guess the game might be decent. Maybe that's why people continue to play it. I don't know the statistics on Raid Shadow Legend, but it looks like they have a solid player base and people are actually playing the game. So it might be fun but that's the thing though. I don't like when something is like advertised a bunch, it just doesn't make me want to play it. It's just like
Yeah.
in your face. It's just real annoying. Like there's a lot of really good to underrated games. Like for example, one of my favorite games is called Ori and the Will of the Wisps, and it's on Steam, and I think it's just like $20. But that game is amazing, man. It's a platformer. It's a short game relatively, but for $20, I feel like you're getting it's an amazing platformer game, and it's
Oh
also
man.
available on Xbox and everything. It's
I know what you mean. I know what you mean. Like I loved the game on Steam called Spec Ops: The Line or something,
mm-hmm.
which was also like pretty cheap at the time it came out, and it wasn't hyped like that. But
Mm-hmm.
man, I love that game. The story was just great. Have you ever played it?
Nah, man.
Man, it can be. I
What's
can
it called?
recommend it. Spec Ops: The Line.
Spec Ops the line. Let me write that down.
I mean, like you're playing this like playing this half insane soldier in Dubai
Mm-hmm.
who has been ordered there to evacuate the town or something because the town is about to be buried in a sandstorm or whatever. Um, but the thing is, like like as you like go around, go on with it, turns out that you're batshit, you're insane, you're thinking you're saving people, right? But you're killing them.
Mm-hmm.
You're thinking that the people are firing back at you and they're the enemies and that they're the enemy and you're killing them, but turns out they're just civilians, right? So kind of like the
Right.
worst example of like what could happen in the war if you like totally lose perception of what's reality and what's not, right? And can't.
Absolutely. That's the
Yeah.
thing too. That's why writing is so important in video games. Because in one of my classes, game design classes, the professor wrote us, well, didn't write it. He told us to read this poem, right? And he asked us if we could make a video game out of it, right? And the answer to that is yes. You can make a video game about anything. Oh, you might be bad, might be a bad game, but you can turn any story into a video game. And so that got me thinking. That's why the gaming industry is so lucrative, because there's a place for everyone. Like actors, story writers, writing programmers, voice acting, everybody has a spot in the game industry. So if it's like tweaked enough, you can make very, you know, everybody has a place. You can make it's your story, right? And you can make like small games unknown and make them fantastic. But that's where the marketing comes, because it doesn't matter how good your game is if nobody has heard of it. You know, it's not going to be successful, and that's the part that sucks the most. Because I'm pretty sure there's a ton of really impressive games out there, but just because, you know, it didn't really pick up, you know, they lose, you know, they
Y-
can't sustain it because they do need to put in resources to continue updating the game and
of course,
making sure, you know.
of course. But it's interesting to touch back on this, that it's a really interesting way of telling a story, right? Because you are also letting the player partake in that story in
Exactly.
in a different way than if you're just watching a movie where you're not partaking, you're just, you know, observing, right?
Hmm.
Um,
Exactly.
so like I can definitely see what you're saying, that there's great
That's right.
potential.
You're transporting the player into the world that you've created. You're, yeah, like you said, yeah, the player's a part of the world, and that's the thing about gaming. That's the you're escaping reality, but in a sense that's bigger than just watching a movie. Because in the movie, you know, you see the visuals, and if you're in the theaters, yeah, you can get transported into that. But when you play the game, it's like your mind is no longer aware of like your immediate vicinity, and it's like focused on that character that you're controlling in the game. And
Yeah,
that's why people love video games, because it also, you know, the concept of failure becomes arbitrary in video games because you get to try again, you know. And that's why people love playing games too, is because, you know, you escape that. Because in real life, failure is often finite. It's like you don't get to try again. You can try again in like I mean, sometimes you can try again, but for generally speaking, the consequences of failure is much greater in real life than in video games, and people can sympathize with that and get lost in it. I mean, that concept in itself has its pros and cons, but it's definitely an appealing factor of gaming in general.
yeah, definitely, and also that you sometimes are letting the player make the choices, right? Like you were
Hmm.
mentioning GTA 5 earlier, and
Hmm.
you're making several choices in GTA 5 along the way, at least in the single player story mode,
Hmm.
as
Yeah.
to who to kill, what gangs to follow, the missions or orders from, and so on, right? And all of this have consequences in the grand scheme of how the story actually plays out.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's why games like Detroit Becomes Human and Heavy Rain were really popular, because it's a story, right? There's no really fighting in it and anything. You're just choosing the outcomes, and that's actually how I structured my game that I'm writing for that one class. Is I have several options, and depending on what you choose, the path changes. But overall, there's a general idea that remains constant. So no matter which option you choose, there's a certain thing that me as the developer, I want you to retain a lesson. Let's put it a lesson that I want you to, you know, to have by the end of the journey. So it's just it's a medium, it's an outlet for a lot of developers. It's a way to express themselves, no different from drawing or singing or whatever. It's there's a message that you want to get across, right? For those kinds of game, at least. There's other games where it's just simple, but yeah.
yeah, like racing games.
Yeah.
Those are pretty straightforward, you know.
Yeah,
Um,
pretty straightforward typically. I mean, sometimes they have like a storyline too, you know, between
Yeah,
things,
well,
but
it's usually like a weak storyline.
yeah, it's just like typically racing games, the people that play, they just want to race, right? They just want the feel of being a car and then racing. It's a simulation basically. Because I've seen like gaming setups. Some people go OD. They have like the pedals and everything. It's like crazy.
Yeah, but it looks cool though to have those kinds of
It
setups.
does. I'm not gonna lie. It looks cool.
All right, Mugen. I think like we're going to end it here, and
All
I
right.
just want to say thank you for coming on, man. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, no problem, man. Yeah, it's no problem. I enjoy these podcasts too. I had no idea too that because it makes sense too. The last time, it was super late for me. It was like 3 in the morning, but I couldn't have that podcast because I just didn't have the. I was in the right headspace. It was just too late. But
Yeah, yeah.
now that I realized the time zone different, it makes sense now.
No, I was aware of your time then, but I was actually just like looking and then seeing that like, oh shit, he's online at 3 a.m. Hmm.
Yeah, that's the
I
thing. That's the
yeah.
thing. If I'm online, I would say like past like past like 1 a.m. here EST. I can't do it. I just don't have the mental capacity because typically it's because I can't really fall asleep. But I'm not talking about anything. I'm usually spending time with a friend or something like that. You know what I mean? Until
Yeah,
I
yeah.
fall asleep.
Yeah,
Typically,
yeah.
that's
I
that's how,
understand.
how it goes.
Um,
Yeah.
and all right, folks. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to this if you find it interesting. And again,
Yeah, man.
thank you for listening.
Subscribe. Subscribe.